via the way you came in or via the chamber as directed by town hall staff. Item 1, declaration of interest. The first item is declaration of interest. I think I'll hand over to Kamal. He has some comments to make.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wrote to all members last week reminding you of your obligations in general and specifically in relation to the budget setting meeting. So you'll all have absorbed that, I'm sure. You don't need to redeclare interests that already appear in your register of interests. There are provisions in law which preclude members from being present and voting on matters related to the budget if they are in 2 or more months arrears of council tax. I'm pleased to say that no councillors are in that position. But there is one matter I just need to deal with before we get into the substantive business, and that's a dispensation. It's a dispensation that's been granted for a dozen or so more years now, but I'll repeat it because it's been re-granted by the Standards Committee on this occasion. So the committee have agreed, again, to grant a dispensation to any elected members who are council tenants or have family members or close associates who are council tenants to enable you to remain and participate and vote on the budget proposals and, crucially, the housing revenue account proposals which come before you tonight, which clearly sets levels of rent. What's important is that if you want to benefit from this dispensation, that you should identify yourselves in a moment so that I can just make a note of your names and record in the minutes that you declared that interest, but you benefited from the dispensation. So if I haven't made myself clear, we set rents tonight, and if you are a council tenant or you have a close family member who's a council tenant, you might be conflicted from voting on the setting of rents for obvious reasons. However, the committee, the Standards Committee, have the power to and have granted a dispensation, so that's an exemption for you to remain and participate and vote on that matter. So if you want to benefit from the dispensation, you have to put your hand up so that I can make a note of your intention. So can I please see, can you please identify yourself if you do have, if you are a council tenant or have close family members who are council tenants? I'll just make a note of you before we move on. Falls on this side of the chamber, and any more from this side of the chamber? No, thank you. Oh, Councillor Potter.
Lord Mayor, could I just get clarification? Is this classed as a disclosable pecuniary interest?
It's not a disclosable pecuniary interest in the sense of income, but it is classed as an interest where you would have a prejudicial interest. Yes. So it acts in a similar way. Doesn't confer criminal liability, but it would preclude you from otherwise remaining and voting. Thank you, Lord Mayor. You may now invite any other declarations of interest if members have them.
Thank you. I invite members to declare any interest they might have in the business agenda for this meeting. None. Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. The next item is minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the council held on 16th January 2025 be taken as read and approved as a correct record. Deputy Lord Mayor? Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. Please can I ask for a show of hands for all in favor? Thank you. And those to the contrary? Okay. I declare the motion carried. Item 3, matters reserved to the council. 3A, housing revenue account, budget. Okay, the next item is the housing revenue account budget, including capital program 2025-26. Councillor Kelvin, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, for this opportunity to rise and propose a one-year balanced budget for 2025-26. I would like to start by thanking Chris Bergin and his team, in particular Stuart McAvoy, the Council's Principal Accountant. I would also like to thank both the Housing Scrutiny Commission and the Overview Select Committee for agreeing to our recommendations. And finally, as well as thanking the Tenants and Leaseholders Forum for their constructive input, I need to thank the 545 other residents who took part in our online survey on face-to-face drop-in sessions. The housing revenue account continues to face significant financial pressure of over £5 million. Along with inflation and increased employee costs, we continue to see the loss of rental income due to the right to buy, which significantly undermines the housing revenue account. Despite this, we have continued every year to invest in our stock. Just over 1 in 7 homes in Leicester are owned by the City Council, and so it is critically important that we look after these assets, not just for current tenants, but for those who will live in them for many years to come. All of our investment work contributes to a better living standard and improves the property's energy efficiency, protecting residents against fuel poverty. Unlike any other landlord in the city, we also continue to invest in our support for tenants. The Support Team Tenants and Resident Service provides one-to-one support to council tenants who might otherwise lose their homes. In the last year alone, we have supported over 770 households, and it is because of their great work that we have such an excellent record in tenancy sustainment. And despite the continued financial pressure our residents face, our income management team have worked hard to support tenants in applying for relevant financial support, which ultimately enables them to pay their rent and live well. This year, we've had a real focus on enhancing our tenancy engagement arrangements, and it is something we will build on throughout 2025. During September 2024, we held 6 engagement events across the city where we invited tenants to come along and tell us how they want to be involved and how they want us to communicate with them. It was no surprise to us that many tenants want to engage with us face-to-face. And for this reason, starting in March, we are setting up weekly pop-up housing offices across the city to support those who are digitally excluded. This pilot scheme will run for at least a year, and so we can learn what works best for our communities. The demand for housing is very high, but we are also in a city with relatively low average household income. So for many, renting from the council is the only hope of a decent and settled home. Along with our front-line staff, as councillors, we see the real human cost of the national housing crisis brings about for our residents and our communities. This issue remains one of the council's top corporate priorities, and we have made significant progress since we declared a housing crisis back in November 2022. Since 2019, we would have invested a total of £245 million and are on track to have delivered 2,600 new affordable homes in the city by 2027. Along with officers, we are in the process of developing a 10-year affordable housing programme. And to finish on a high, our ability to tackle the housing crisis locally has been significantly improved since the Labour government came into power just over 6 months ago. We have seen rapid changes in planning reform, reinstating of house building targets, upfront cash injection for affordable homes, announcement of new towns, renters reform bill, changes to right to buy, and ultimately the prospect of devolution, which would enable better strategic planning across the county. Each of these, in their way, will help tackle the housing and temporary accommodation crisis and will unlock opportunities for us to build and buy a new generation of council homes. Providing a decent home is not just about bricks and mortar. It can also lead to improvements in educational achievement, health, and help tackle poverty and reduce crime. Creating sustainable communities is also more than housing. It means cleaner, safer, greener neighbourhoods in which people have confidence and pride. This budget shows a Labour council who continue to listen and respond to the needs of our council tenants and leaseholders. I recommend I set out in the council script. Thank you.
Are you moving the motion here?
Yes.
Who is seconding it?
Oh,
Yes, seconded, Lord Mayor, and reserve my remarks.
Thank you. Any speakers, Councillor Porter?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I hate to burst a bubble, but this budget, I say, neglects Leicester's poorest residents, undermines the council's own climate change goals, and it fails to tackle the housing crisis. You mentioned that you're not just providing decent homes. Well, the reality is you're not really providing any homes whatsoever, despite declaring a housing crisis and recognising that there are 6,600 plus households on the housing register, which is the council's waiting list, waiting for homes. The council's done very little to try and address this. The council actually has land itself that it owns, hundreds of acres, out at Ashton Green, that was allocated to build 3,500 homes. But what has the Labour Council done? Has it managed to build 3,500 homes? Has it managed to build 1,000 homes? No, unfortunately not. Because if you look through the report, and this is according to the report, the only data I could find about new council house building in the report was that in 2023-24, they built just 12 homes. Now, that isn't providing decent homes. That's a token gesture. I think we can all agree on that. So how on earth are they going to address their self-proclaimed housing crisis when they're building such a small number of homes? The council appear under Sir Peter Soulsby to put more effort into not building homes. For example, they've submitted successful planning applications to reduce the number of houses at Ashton Green by 1,200. That's over 34%. Why haven't they been spent the last 10 or 20 years actually building council houses out there? The government in 2015 relaxed the borrowing rules. The council have already quoted this to say that local authorities could use their housing revenue account to start building more homes. But what have we got? 23-24, just 12 new homes. It really isn't good enough. So my question to Sir Peter, and I hope he will answer this, is how does building less solve the need for providing more? If you look through the report, you'll also see that it says within the report that every year the city needs to provide 1,117 affordable homes. So imagine if we had a leadership in this council which wasn't so woefully inadequate, and they actually addressed the housing crisis, and they'd built 1,200 homes out at Ashton Green, instead of this token gesture of just 12 homes across the city. I mean, if you look at what's actually been going on, they even set up a house building company where they were meant to be providing new homes. I think it was in 2018. Quote me if I've got that wrong. But they hadn't even laid one single brick. The housing company that they created in order to build new homes went out of business last year, and they hadn't built one single home. I mean, this is how woefully inadequate this Labour Council is. And they stand up here saying, oh, we've got a housing crisis. Well, all they're doing is pontificating. What they need to be doing is actually acting on it, because actions speak louder than words, and building more than just 12 houses. All they seem to be doing is just posturing and gesturing and putting up rents. There's going to be 6,800 households in this city who are some of the poorest and most vulnerable people who are going to have to pay an additional £124.50 a year for the privilege of living in a council house. And then we have another vulnerable group, the gypsies and the travellers, and they're putting their rents up by 4%, well over the rate of inflation. It's quite disgusting, really, that they can stand here and pontificate about what they're doing when the reality is they're doing very little. The other thing that I mentioned about was a climate emergency. Well, there's nothing in this report which is about addressing the climate emergency. There's only an additional £200 for energy improvements, and that's across 19,000 properties. In terms of the boiler replacement, they're actually cutting the funding for boiler replacements by £500,000. There's no significant investment in renewables, low carbon heating systems, no solar heat pumps, and no retrofitting of council properties. So this budget, as I said, neglects the poorest and most vulnerable residents in the city. It undermines the council's own climate goals, and it fails to address the housing crisis. So we on this side will not be supporting it.
Any more speakers?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. First of all, to thank the City Mayor for taking on the amendment to the recommendations that district heating, any reductions in district heating charges should be delegated to himself, but that he agrees that should there be a need to increase district heating charges, or at least a proposal, that it comes back to this council chamber. Nobody can have gone through the previous crisis with district heating charges and to have seen what is currently happening in the world, to know that price spikes in energy could be happening. But even if they do happen, that this council and this full council should decide how that impacts the people who are on the district heating scheme. But I think it is useful with this debate, and in a sense, to hijack this debate for something that probably should come to this council, which is an annual discussion about states of housing in the city. We don't have it on a council agenda. It would probably be good to bring it as an annual report, but without that being there, Lord Mayor, I think it is interesting to try and conduct some of that debate for the discussion of the housing revenue account and the housing capital account. If we were to listen to Councillor Cook-Kelvin, we would think that everything was rosy in the garden of housing, and it clearly is not. The feedback that we get from tenants, it is welcome that people will go to face-to-face. The council is distant, yeah? It often isn't communicative. We do recognise the need to do those communication measures. But I'm rather worried, as somebody who was party to the declaration of the housing emergency, that the reports back I get from people in the city is that when things now go wrong in the housing department, people on the front line say, well, what can you do? There's a housing emergency. And actually, the housing emergency, instead of being a call to action, has become an excuse for poor performance. Because if you look round the city, you will observe north, south, east, west, you will see the gardens of rubble on sites where housing could be built. Go south to Southfields Drive and you will see a cleared site with nothing apparently happening. If you go to the west, you can go to the site of Forest Lodge. Again, you see another site that is prime for the development of housing. You go to the east, and we have the long-running saga of Hospital Close, where it took months and months to get planning application to change housing into housing. Yeah? And then, yes, you look puzzled, Lord Mayor, not as puzzled as everybody else is, about the delay of years and years to get housing developed on Hospital Close. And finally, when you go to the north of the city, further news about the Lees, that there will be further delay in delivering housing on that site. Lord Mayor, we should use this opportunity to say that actually the performance of the housing department needs to improve. It needs to improve rapidly. And that the way to address a housing emergency is, quite obviously, to build houses. Now, the excuse of having a Conservative government is now gone. I hope it is not replaced with an excuse about the housing emergency. The figures put in for the rises today are quite modest. They happen to land because of a quirk of particularly low inflation in the month that rents are set nationally by government. And so I think that there is some relief from tenants. But there is still patches of very poor performance. In particular, councillors in Western Ward will have seen that the Burns flat at Aikman Avenue, the heating system went off right in the middle of winter. And the housing department's response was, quite generously, is we won't charge you for a heating system that is broken. Yeah. That is too often the attitude, where it does not see things from the tenant's point of view. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, for the opportunity to speak on this matter. I do think that this council does need to recognise there's a lot of good that the council do in the housing department, but there is a heck of a lot that needs to improve. And I think sometimes giving speeches that talk about how everything is in the garden is rosy, if that's just political spin, then fair enough, I'll give it to you. But actually, you don't recognise that if we don't come back in a year's time and see substantive improvement and action on sites like Southfields Drive, like Forest Lodge, like the Lees, then we will continue to have the problems in the city that we see today.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I was going to say some of the things that Councillor Kittrick was going to say. Housing has been depleted year after year, and we've seen very, very little of social housing built. It's a gimmick affordable. It's not affordable. Only social housing, as some authorities across this country have recognised, that people will always need more social housing. Young people can't even get on the mortgage ladder. Taxman Labour, Rachel Reeves, all she's concerned with is putting tax up and making it less affordable for people to even rent a property. Scandalous. Unless, stop the gimmick, stop this affordable housing, because it's not affordable, as some of our constituents have already said. There's more people in private rented. That's the only alternative a lot of people have got. And those that come to me and say, I'm being evicted, what can I do? I want to go on social housing, but I said, well, I'm sorry, but the waiting list is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and nothing is being done about it. So it's time Keir Starmer woke up and Rachel Reeves stop the high taxes, lower the taxes, and let people afford rents. Thank you, Lord Mayor. And we will be opposing this.
Councillor Huck.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that one of the biggest things that I get when we go to do my surgery is housing, and people, the fact that they can't get property from the council. There's a huge problem of supply in the city, and generally the problem has been that the council, to try and get onto the council waiting list, to try and get up at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday to get into the queue to make sure that you get a council house is extremely difficult. And the reality is that places like Hospital Close, that is on my patch as an Evington councillor, I first visited there some 2.5 years ago, and I was thinking, well, surely these there's 132 houses there. Somebody needs to get in there and refurbish them quickly and get this back up and running. If it would have been a commercial company, that would have been done within 6 months to a year. It's been done by a council, and it's taken so long for 132 homes, and the cost of the security at £484,000, almost £500,000, is absolutely ridiculous. Right? There's other people who do these kind of property developments, and they should have been thinking outside of the box. What they should have done is have some CCTV cameras monitored so they could check who's on that street at any given time, and that could be 24/7. The cost of that is about £1,500 per week instead of £15,000 per week. £16,500 per week. That's the difference. And that's taxpayers' money, council money that we could have spent on housing. But I wouldn't actually spend it on housing. I would probably have spent that money on making sure that we've got a planning department that is efficient and quick at turning around planning applications. If you have a tenant or any developer or anybody putting an application in for a property development, it takes them weeks to get verified, it takes them weeks to get an answer, and in some cases 6 months to a year, 18 months, 2 years, and in the end they give up and walk away. And the reality is, you need supply in the market. The more houses that come up, be it private, be it housing developments, wherever they are, whatever value they are, it actually improves the supply element right the way through the chain, because the people who have got a 3-bedroom house move to a 4-bedroom house, and the people who have got a 2-bedroom house move to a 3-bedroom house, and the people who have got a 1-bedroom house need to move to a 2-bedroom house they can. It releases the whole system, so it has massive, massive improvements. And the reality is that the planning department needs investment, needs numbers of people in there to make sure that they can do it at a reasonable level. I know there's a national shortage of planning officers. That's apparent with every single council. But we need to do something different. We need to think about it differently and make sure that the supply is created in the city, because without that, nothing will change. I have so many people that constantly ring me that say to me, what's happening with these houses on Hospital Close? When are they going to be available? When can we get them? But it's not going to happen that quickly, because it just has taken so long. And there's probably another 500 people or 600 people that have been added to the list since that development started. But what we need to be looking at is to say, actually, how do we use our money to the maximum possible effect? They could have easily spoken to the hospital. They bought the site off the hospital and said to them, you've got security at the general hospital. Can you make a visit every hour in the evening time to Hospital Close, and we'll pay you an extra amount of money and keep an eye on our properties there, just so that it keeps away from vandalism and antisocial behaviour. That could have been done. The security that's there at the moment is a cabin that doesn't have any windows, so nobody can see out. There was a burglary across the road, and they knew nothing about it. The residents who are on that street, who are across the road, had a burglary, and everybody was oblivious to it. So how good is the security, and how good was that money well spent at £500,000? And when you look at the rent that people are paying, I've got a problem with something else here. Why are we charging people from the gypsy community 4% and everybody else 2.7%? That's surely unfair on that community. We should be charging everybody a blank rate across the board, an increase. And for me, that feels like it's wrong, because no community or no set of travellers should be discriminated against and being charged a higher rent. If there's a historical reason for that, I don't know. But looking at that paper, 2.7 for everybody else and 4% for gypsies does not sit well with me. That's for sure. And the other thing I want to mention is, it's all great trying to save money, but look at where we're wasting money. The park and ride, £500,000 a year.
Councillor, your time is up. Just wind up, please.
We've got primary schools that need investment, just don't have any facilities. We need to make sure we invest in what are really important to the citizens of Leicester. Thank you.
Councillor Modwadia.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As you guys know, I'm a new councillor. I'm still learning for this politics, but I want to say a few words regarding this housing, because I'm in housing committee and planning committee as well. And I think a couple of years ago, I said about what Councillor Huck said. I don't want to repeat what everybody said, but I want to say council should do something to stop this housing crisis. Yes, we are in crisis, but why we are in crisis? Because Leicester have a less employment, and people are earning less. If the Leicester have a more employment, then people don't need to wait in the queue for the housing, because they're earning money and they can easily afford to buy the house or rent the house themselves. So I think we need to look where is the problem started. Instead of fixing the housing, borrowing more money, instead of why we not concentrating bringing more business in the city and more employment? That will solve the problem to the housing crisis as well. So I'm not going to repeat all other things, but that's I wanted to add as well. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Councillor Bhatia.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I think enough has been said already, but I have 3 points that I would like to make. The point, number one, that the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Kelvin, made about not just providing the houses, but also the surroundings, which are nice, green and peaceful, the amenities, etc. But again, this is the same council that opposed our motion to say Beaumont Park. Beaumont Leys is one of the biggest wards when it comes to council tenancy. And people in that area around the park actually survive on the availability of that open space, which is now under threat because the local plan motion was rejected. So I think it's a bit of a, I don't know what word to explain, but saying this, that we just don't want to provide houses, but also the good surroundings and the green spaces is a bit of a, it doesn't stack up. Number two, they're borrowing 15 million pounds extra. Fair enough, understand. But then if you look at further down and look into this, the council that professes on making things digital on telephone is going to spend 700,000 pounds on recruiting 10 officers to certain things when the rent bill takes into effect to get satisfaction surveys. It doesn't add up. 700,000 pounds to recruit 10 more officers just to do certain other things and go door to door to get satisfaction survey. When has council ever done this kind of survey for many other things, including the local plan, for example? Yeah. So borrowing money is fine, but where is it being spent? If you're going to stack up just the numbers in the council with more officers and make it more top heavy, then that's not the right way to do it. It should be invested where it's needed in the frontline services, actually building the homes and houses, or buying or procuring the stock. So that's point number two. And I think point number three is a lot of residents, and this is the educational part that doesn't come out very clearly about the council tenancy succession. Lots of people actually have their families living with them for many, many years, and then suddenly the parents pass away, and then the children have to be evicted. It's a complete, it's a shambles. I mean, there is no compassion around this. That's it. You're out. You might be living here for 25 years with your parents, but they're gone, you're out. Where do they go? So there is no such succession arrangement that is compassionate and that allows, or at least educate people to say, look, this is what's happening, you need to prepare for it, or we will make some arrangements so it allows the council tenants who have been living there for many, many years. And there are two parts. One is prior to April 2012, one is post 2012, but it distinguishes and it doesn't solve the problem. It actually exacerbates the problem. So we really need, as a council, to come up with some sort of a solution which allows people who have the family living with them, but the tenancy is with them, to have an adequate arrangement for proper succession. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Chauhan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to bring a few points to attention in front of this chamber. It's going to be 2 years, in about 2 months' time, this chamber has been elected, and the people have voted us, and we all council now, so we got responsibility towards our residents. In 22 months, what have we achieved for our residents? You can ask yourself. I've seen nothing, if you ask me. There is no progress. Last year in this chamber, we were discussing similar issues. Is there any solution? Housing crisis, still same, probably gone worse. What has been done? Probably what? 20 houses built or whatever. If that. Hundreds of people came in this city, surely within 1 year. More people in the housing queue. In our surgery, we get many people comes for council house. They band 3, band 2, band 1, months, years. Some people are in the queue for 9 years. I've seen one case, 12 years. No progress. Second point is, rather than blaming XYZ government, we need to act. Whichever government was in the past or present, but we are the people, we need to make the changes. People elected us, so it's us that matters. People don't care which government runs the country or city. They want action. So I think we need to spend more money on housing. We need to build more houses or buy more houses. That's one point. Second, people who's living in the council house. They're also going through crisis. The rent rise, the light bill, gas bill. Last year, many houses got electric meter installed. Not all of them go installed yet. So some people who's got meter installed, they go charge for meter installation, they go standing charge, and then unit rate. We got massive queue of people that comes to our surgery and complain. Oh, we got meter installed, we not sign, why we go installed? Why XYZ hasn't got a meter? And if you check in this budget, there are enough houses, they don't have meter installed. So they got different charge. That's going to change as well. So there's question, why all of them not got meter installed? That's question number one. Number two is why meter go installed for those people who hasn't signed? Because they're all suffering. You will see, you probably think that might not be true. It's just in the Belgrave, but no, it's not. It's all over the city. And you will see in next meeting people sitting here complaining unless things get sorted. So I urge the city mayor and the team to do more for people. Thank you.
Any more speakers? I keep on saying, last time I forgot somebody, it was good at all. That's the reason I keep on asking. No more speakers? Okay, City Mayor? No? Councillor Kelvin?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and thank you for everyone for your contributions to this evening's debate. I do have a few points that I would like to come back on, if you don't mind. Firstly, the point that we neglect vulnerable residents. As I stated at the start, the council homes that we provide remain the cheapest type of tenure within this city, the only affordable tenure for many people who live in this city. And the additional support that we provide to help sustain those tenancies is invaluable. We currently have a sustainment rate of over 95%. The accusation that we don't provide decent homes, oh goodness me. I speak to leaders across the country, and I'm really proud of our housing revenue account and the fact that the council stock that we have in the city, virtually all of it, so, you know, just shy of 100% of it is at the decent home standards. Now, that really isn't something we can take for granted. I think we have taken it for granted in this city. Now I was talking to a leader of council down south. Over 50% of their stock sits below the decent home standards. Their stock is in such poor condition, and this isn't unique to one, this is happening to many councils across the country. Stock is of such a poor condition, they cannot afford to invest in it, and therefore they are selling council housing to the private sector so that they can be refurbished. That is a reality. We take for granted our decent home standard here in this city. Ashton Green, I'm not going to return on, it's a broken record, and quite simply I think Councillor Porter has just got this knack, you know, the more I repeat something, the more it's going to become truth. It will eventually become... Yeah, I tell you what, Councillor Porter, I'll answer that question specifically another time. You can raise it again in the next full council. Quite happy. Quite happy to answer it again. In terms of us acting like there's a housing crisis and not actually delivering, well, you know, since 2019, we've delivered 1,269 new affordable homes. That's not acting, that's delivering. In terms of the climate emergency, everything we do in terms of our investment in our properties contributes to the climate emergency. New bathrooms, new kitchens, new roofs. All our new builds have got ambitious energy efficiency standards. In terms of planning for the FLEC, you'll be pleased to know that planning application is going through for FLEC. Hospital Close, the first units will be delivered in 2 months' time, and when delivered, there'll be 135 council-owned units at that site. Southfield Drive, we have a contractor procured. Burns Flats, oh my goodness, we've just given the community a new community room for them to use as a hub. Planning application being slow, I think Councillor Hack, you answered your own question. You know, you said there's a national shortage of planners. I don't disagree that it needs to be faster, but I don't believe that we have the answer here ourselves this evening as part of this council. Gypsy and Travellers, the reason they're being charged 4% is actually it needs to be a self-sustaining budget. They need to pay for their own part of the budget, and we can't transfer over. So the 4% reflects the additional cost that we're actually spending on the Gypsy and Traveller sites. The satisfaction surveys, which we're not to do because it's a waste of time and money, there's new actual regulatory framework which we have to adhere to, and therefore legally have to do satisfaction surveys. And I've never heard anyone say that satisfaction surveys shouldn't be done. I just find it ludicrous. Our succession policy, that's going to scrutiny in the next few weeks. Quite happy for you to contribute towards that. And we do support tenants when people need to move on, where they haven't got succession rights. We do support them into another tenancy. District heating, the people who haven't got district heating meters, because they didn't want them. We couldn't make them take them. And the fact is, we are significantly reducing both the fixed and the variable cost in this budget here tonight. Really, I'm bored of myself coming back on those questions, on those points. I could have gone on, but I think I've made my point. Thank you.
Okay. I'm now putting the motion to the chamber. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay. All those to the contrary, please raise your hands. I declare the motion carried. Item 3B, capital program. The next item is the capital program 2025-26. City Mayor, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I move the motion that's contained in the script that members will have had. In doing so, I remind members that, of course, this year's capital budget is significantly reduced. Members will be aware of the reasons for that and our desire to use as much as we are able from our capital resources to support revenue. I am presenting this evening another one-year programme, and obviously it is of limited scale. Nonetheless, there are some significant things within it. We've got 6 million of school maintenance spending within here, contributing to the well-being of our schools and the well-being, particularly of the young people who learn there and the staff who work there. There is some 5.36 million of highway maintenance within here, keeping our roads usable and doing our very best to deal with the always present issues of potholes and repair. We've got 2.58 million of transport improvements, again something that is important in investment in the infrastructure of the city. And of course, I'm always very pleased to see this in here, we have 1.86 million of disabled facilities grants, which does enable people to maintain a decent quality of life and to maintain their time at home, and indeed is part of what we are able to do to take some of the pressure off hospital admissions and the NHS. We've got 8.3 million of investment in council-owned buildings, which includes buildings we occupy ourselves, those we let to businesses, and obviously it's important that we do that in a way that ensures we act as a good landlord, but also ensures the income that we receive from that investment in those buildings. It includes investment in the Lakeoff Road depot, in libraries and community centres out and about across the city and in our communities. Obviously, I'm particularly pleased as well to see within the programme, say, albeit a reduced programme, nonetheless, £400,000 of local environmental works, which I know is something that members very much appreciate when we have our frequent meetings to talk about how they want to prioritise the work that is done in their wards. And of course, the local environmental works is an important part of that. We also have within here some £300,000 of flood and drainage schemes, which goes on top of the many, many millions of pounds that have been spent over many, many decades now by the city in flood prevention. But of course, we don't need to be reminded that that's investment that continues to be needed as the climate change has its impact, and indeed as homes in the city find themselves inundated. We have some £450,000 in here for street cleaning equipment, and this is something that I often do get comments from the public about, and indeed sometimes criticism from members about. And it is the quality of the cleanliness of our streets, and I'm very pleased that we are able to continue to invest in keeping those streets clean and using the latest technology to do so. It's the most effective way of cleaning streets, although actually can never replace the person with a broom out there. And I see them every morning as I walk into work, cleaning up after the night before. And I mean, I'm almost impressed by what they do, but obviously street cleaning equipment enables them to do the job more speedily and more effectively. My Lord Mayor, the programme we have here has been to scrutiny, and I'm very grateful for the support that scrutiny has given to the report, and I therefore move the capital programme for 2025-26. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Cassidy, you're seconding the motion.
Seconded, my Lord Mayor, and reserve my remarks.
Thank you. Councillor Porter.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. The Labour Council really, I don't think, is doing enough to tackle the climate change that we're currently facing. And I would say, if you read through this report, where they're cutting money, they're actively undermining their own goals that they set up a few years ago to tackle the climate emergency. They're clearly not allocating sufficient money towards improving properties, for example, for retrofitting or insulation. They're certainly not providing enough money for flood defences or improving drainage. There's only £1.3 million that's been on their so-called investor save scheme. They haven't even got a dedicated climate emergency fund. They've got no large-scale projects which they should be putting in place in order to tackle the climate change and start to reduce carbon emissions. Such as the amount of money that they put to one side, I think it's over £8 million. None of that is specifically allocated in the report to retrofitting council buildings, for installing renewable energy schemes, or even expanding the green infrastructure, including planting trees or maybe even putting solar panels on some of the buildings. So this £8.3 million that the council's spending on their own buildings has no direct funding or no direct implications in order to tackle the climate emergency, which the council clearly has. It's another proclamation that they made a few years ago. And again, as it is with the housing crisis, they're all very good at doing this grandstanding, saying we've got this policy in place. But when push comes to shove, actions speak louder than words. And this budget demonstrates that the council now is no longer committed to the climate emergency. So Sir Peter Soulsby speaks about measures that were put in place years ago to tackle flooding. But we've had flooding last month, across the whole city. People in Ayleston were flooded out of their houses. I think also in parts of Belgrave, Rushing Mead. And what's the city mayor doing? This would be an ideal opportunity now at this budget to move some of this money that he's allocated towards the council's own buildings and put it into addressing the flooding in the city. People can't go through it again. We were told in Ayleston it was a 1 in 100 year event. It's happened twice in the last 2 years, well, almost 3 times, I would say, so 1.5 times. It could keep happening again. And it seems to be the council isn't taking it seriously. Even today, people have contacted me saying, when are the council going to do anything? Why aren't they getting their act together? Why aren't they coordinating a response? Why aren't they pulling the Environment Agency together with Severn Trent Water to get something done? This would have been an ideal opportunity. But again, the council just doesn't appear to care. And they haven't done anything at all. This is the other thing. This budget is insufficient. It lacks ambition. There's nothing in here to tackle the climate change. There's nothing in here to tackle the flooding that's taking place. Derisory amounts. The council has an opportunity to really do something about it. And people are feeling very let down, certainly in Ayleston. That's why we're putting forward an alternative proposal to try and allocate some funding towards the flooding that's taking place in Ayleston, and also to have some other environmental improvements. Because the climate change, Sir Peter might not believe it and think, oh, it's not going to impact on him, but it will on future generations, and we need to address it today. We can't wait until tomorrow. So this is what we should be doing now, is putting our millions of pounds that we've got into addressing the climate emergency and retrofitting some of the buildings. What also concerns me is they're taking, this is how much this council doesn't seem to understand what's going on. You're taking £90 million out of the capital programme and putting it into revenue. That money should be used in the capital programme in order to address the climate emergency. And unless they wake up to that, they can carry on with all their pontificating, oh yeah, we've set up a new initiative. But then the reality is they're doing very little in exactly the same as they are with their housing. They love to make out they're doing stuff and argue, oh, we can go argue until we're blue in the face that we haven't got rid of 1,200 homes out of the housing allocation at Ashton Green when they have. They talk about the planning department being slow. It's very quick when the Labour Council puts in a planning application to remove 1,200 homes. It's dealt with a ticket, didn't even go to the committee. So what we need to see is the Labour Council addressing the climate emergency and addressing the housing crisis. And until we see that happening, I think the people of this city need to vote them out.
Councillor Bhatia.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, let me, first of all, although this topic is slightly with the revenue, but let me start by thanking the City Mayor for listening to the people. And many councillors like us in agreeing to extend the support for Adventure Playground for another year. Although it falls short, still a good start, or maybe a good U-turn, I would say. But I hope the council will now act to find a sustainable solution, mainly by looking at extending their leases so that they can fund themselves to sustain themselves. And we are happy to support that and contribute in those discussions. But coming back to this capital budget, Lord Mayor, as Councillor Porter just mentioned, there's nothing in this budget other than numbers adjusted to balance the books. It hasn't got the real character or vision. It looks very bland. It kicks the can further down the road, the dangers in the future. So we must call out why the council is in this situation where it is today. It is because of the wrong priorities from past several years, with the so-called vanity or fancy projects, and also down to some, in fact quite a lot, internal waste. Now moving £90 million from capital fund to revenue might seem like solving the problem, but actually, as I said, it's pushing the problem further down. Council's own document, the budget document, states clearly that this will therefore induce further borrowing on the capital side, which will then add to £5 million per year to council's liabilities. The budget therefore has big implications for the following years to come. But who will bear the cost? The taxpayers. Kicking can down the road will eventually catch up with us in 27-28. That's my prediction. Unless, of course, the government actually comes to the rescue. But we have little hopes there.
Councillor Ray Batter, I'm sorry to interrupt, but 2 minutes into your speech, I just want to be clear that if you are intending to move your amendment, you would need to move it within this speech. You couldn't speak later to move an amendment.
It will be in this speech.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. The government that does not care about old age pensioners, why would it care about any one of us here in Leicester? Councillors and mayors will come and go, but who will pick the brunt of it? The normal people on the road. That's not the right way to do it. In reality, what people really want is investment in their communities, in their surroundings, in their frontline services that matter to them on a daily basis. And not on pet projects like never-ending connecting Leicester, cafe museums, bus lanes, and ultra-wide cycle lanes. I mean, seriously, some of them are so wide you can actually land a small plane on them. So, Lord Mayor, as an opposition which listens to the public and their views, we have put together an amendment to this budget to address some of those issues. I must stress, we have taken the advice from the finance director, and we have sifted through the budget numbers quite diligently and pragmatically and managed to identify 4.78 million worth of savings, because we believe that the numbers were already padded up and inflated. And when you delegate the authority to the council, to the mayor, he then is able to play with those numbers, those inflated numbers around. But we can't. So therefore, this amendment, we are asking for this amendment so that the investments can be made to the frontline services. Therefore, I present the amendment, which will be seconded by Councillor Kittrick. And I hope the council will make the right choice in supporting that so that they can go back to their residents and say, look, we listen to you. The amendment was shared with the councillors via email, and also it's with the PAC. Thank you, Lord.
Can I just be clear about sorry. Okay, has everybody seen the amendment? So what's happening now is, I just saw it.
Councillor Ray Batter has spoken on the motion. Within his speech, he's moved the amendment. He circulated the amendment in advance, so everybody has it. So we now move into the process for dealing with the amendment. Councillor Ray Batter won't be speaking again until the end of the amendment debate. Now we invite Councillor Ray Batter's seconder to second the amendment. Then we can have an amendment debate and a vote on the amendment.
Seconded, Lord Mayor, reserve my remarks.
Thank you. Okay, now we are discussing the amendment. Okay, any speakers on the amendment? Mr. Porter.
Yeah. This is actually a very, very good amendment, and I hope that the Labour group will support it, because what we're trying to do is really address the issues that we'd raised, specifically about the climate emergency. So I won't take a long time going over this, but really what we've done here is managed to put together some good projects which will help to address the climate emergency and will also help to address the problems which are occurring in the city. So I think we'd all be really disappointed, especially the residents in all these wards, if Labour don't support this. And if they don't support it, we will, of course, go around and tell people that we put forward these plans, very sensible plans, properly costed plans, and that Labour turned it down. So that's what you need to remember. So I'm not putting any pressure on you. So if you don't want to be councillors next time around, bear that in mind. Because we're certainly going to let people know that Labour don't care about the environment and they don't care about the people in the city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
We're still on the amendment. Any speakers on the amendment?
Just to clarify, I did make a mistake.
That's why I was asking you.
Councillor Kittrick has reserved his remarks, so he will speak penultimately. But the last speaker on the amendment debate is the mover of the original motion, which is Sir Peter, not Councillor Ray Bhatia.
Okay, please, yeah.
One day I'll get this right, my Lord Mayor. Okay, thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. When we think back to many years ago, this city in England was the first one that was granted Environment City. But in the funding earlier, there's no specific funding for electric vehicles in the main proposal. Previously, there was employed consultants who said the council should have been doing more to encourage people to use electric vehicles. And in the original amendment, moving 90 million from the capital fund to revenue undermines the council's ability to spend on projects to address the climate emergency. I'm pleased that to support the amendment that after the recent events in my own ward of Ayleston alongside Councillor Porter and in other wards across the city, we do have a fully costed amendment to put forward more environmental package for our residents in our wards affected and across the city as a whole. And I would urge members opposite to consider supporting the amendment. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Any more speakers? Councillor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to say, look, even in Evington, we've got issues with flooding, and there's very little help for residents. It's a real big struggle for them to get insurance on their properties now. Once you get flooded, there's no insurance for your property. You've got to declare it on when you sell the property, and it's made it very difficult for lots of residents, particularly elderly residents in Evington, who have this problem with flooding. And there's just, you know, it's like banging your head against a brick wall. So I would like to see more investment in the flooding issue and the drainage problem. There is people who are genuinely struggling to insure their properties. And God forbid they have a serious problem, they will be left homeless, and we'll have to pick up the pieces for them as well. And it's not actually right. I also want to mention, actually, the railway station. The railway station is going to cost us the best part of £5 million, as we've heard earlier. It might be more than that now, because we don't know where it's going to end. I think we've got to think long and hard. When we've got so many issues with schools, flooding, and so many other demands on the council capital budgets, you know, I'd like to see that money personally being spent on special needs children and making sure there's more places for special needs children in our schools, and putting that investment into that, so that we don't have all these issues of having to make children travel across the city to go to their schools because there's no special needs places nearby to where they live. And also, the problem is that the money we have is limited, so we don't have a great deal of money. But I use the analogy very simply. If you sent somebody to go to Tesco's and say, oh, go and buy some bread and milk. You go into Tesco's to buy bread and milk, but you see an offer on the washing liquid. The washing liquid is buy one, get one free. So he buys the washing liquid and comes back home. Is that any good or not? Because actually you want bread and milk. The reality is we don't need 15 or 20 million spent on the railway station. Out of that money, it's 5 million of our own money, or maybe 10 million by the time we come to finish it. We can use that money on more important priorities that we have in this city. And the railway station is quite adequate, quite good looking enough as it is, apart from the fact we knocked down the parcel yard and it looks horrible on that side now. And we were told, I remember going to one of those meetings, and we were told, we don't know what's behind there, it might be something beautiful. It wasn't. We got it wrong. And we should hold our hands up and say we got it wrong on that. The other issues that I want to mention is we are supposed to be working in partnership with all the other organisations. I mentioned earlier the Park and Ride, £500,000 we're losing, £10,000 a week we are losing on that Park and Ride. And that's because we won't allow it to stop at the Royal Infirmary, because they say it doesn't need to go to the Royal Infirmary, it costs us money. What kind of partnership are we actually sending? We've got problems in Evington, my ward, because people are parking there and walking to the General Hospital because they work there. We've got problems around the Royal Infirmary, and no doubt at some stage we'll have problems around the Glenfield. But the reality is we need to be working in partnership and making sure that we work together and make sure that this city has improved bus services. When it comes to money, we need to think 10 times of how we spend our money because it's in short supply. And the reality is, I did an FOI, Freedom of Information request, on Granby Street, and I'll be sending that out on the GDL group very shortly. It runs into millions of pounds on one street. Would you rather have 10 really well-kept streets rather than just one really good street? And that's the reality that we have. And we have to cut budgets. I've got residents in my patch that trip over pavements on a regular basis, and the officers go out and say it's not the required height. And some of the pictures they send me of their faces all bruised and everything else, and I keep complaining to the officers, and they said, no, Councillor Hack, we have no money. We can't do that. So I said, okay, fine. And I keep telling the residents the same thing. But it does hurt me, because every time they ring me or contact me, they expect something can be done. And I said, actually, we just don't have any money. And there we have money for these vanity projects of Granby Street, of the railway station, of other things across the city. Think about how money is used, because it is important to every single resident. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
I would like to ask the movers the amendment about the proposal to reduce the operational estate capital maintenance budget, because I believe, as it states in the documents, this is on a condition and risk basis where they studied the condition of buildings and what work needs to be done to make sure they don't deteriorate any further. I'm certainly aware in my own world of the state of the Netherhall Neighbourhood Centre, and that certainly needs work done on it to keep it open. In fact, the front door has not been used for some months now because of vandalism, and it's going to be repaired now, but it's taken a long, long time to get that job done. Although the operational state is particularly buildings to council's own use, I'm also aware of the need for investment in upgrading the shopping parade in Netherhall, and that I believe is separately in the budget. But we do need to look after council-owned properties, whether they're for council-owned use or for renting to other people. Thank you.
So you need to support the amendment.
Okay. Councillor Modwadia.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to request all councillors that they should take their own decision, because last year, even twice it's been flooded in Leicester. So the amendment showing that we need to spend more money on the environmental. So I request all councillors to think their own people. That's why they voted you to look after what emergency need in Leicester. So I think I'm supporting amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Chauhan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I will urge the members to support this motion because it's going to help residents who have suffered twice in less than 12 months on floods. City has been flooded twice. There's no work been done. I've seen in budget there is a £300,000 been for cleansing and gullies and drainage system. That's not enough. There is 400,000 for environment. That's not enough. Because if that was enough, we would not be harder flooded again, second time round in less than 12, 14 months. Same property has been flooded twice. Last time round, ex-government supported. This time around, government is not supported. Why? Because they've already been supported once. So it can't be support twice. Now the resident who owns their own houses or renting those houses, which are nearby the brooks or canals, they hardly recover from the first time round flood. I was out first time round. I went second time round as well to see those places. I've seen people go rescued by fire brigade and officers. hip-high water. They were literally, the houses were under hip-high water. Even today, those houses are not recovered from the rain, and the damage has been done. What support we given to them? Hardly anything. Maybe relief on council tax. If we don't do anything now, we will be again same next year in this chamber, looking each other, thinking we could have done. Yes, we got right today. Today is the time. We can do it. We can stop those things happening. Majority here, people are senior to me, and they know the role. So I don't need to tell them what they should be doing. Listen to the people. Do the things that matters. Whether you have cycle lane or not, doesn't matter. Whether the museum open tomorrow, it doesn't matter. It's been closed for 10 years. It can stay closed for another 10 years. But those houses should not be suffering, and people should not be suffering through the flood again. So I urge the member, listen to your soul, if you have one, and support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Osman.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I think it's the capital budget we're discussing, I understand. I mean, from experience, capital budgets actually go around in terms of asking wards as to what your interests are. And I don't know how much the Labour Group input have had in relation to this capital programme. I mean, all I'm reading is everything is under corporate. Nothing is going towards any of the wards that I'm looking at across the chamber. What this amendment does actually is we've actually targeted certain areas where there is deficiency that needs to make up some of the capital that needs to be invested in some of those areas. I mean, in my ward, I know I've spoken to the city mayor. He's actually kindly been out, I'd say, and had a look, but we're still waiting for the contribution. And this amendment actually puts a suggestion in of £400,000 for Thurn Court in relation to making the shopping precinct a lot more attractive, accessible for disabled young people, children, and all the rest of it, because it really needs investment. I know we've, in the past, the Labour Group have invested mass amount of money in the city centre, and wards across in the outer areas have totally been forgotten. So I'm really urging the Labour Group, if in terms of any input you've had, I'd like to hear what input you've had, because there's an amount of 8.3 million in relation to council buildings. Now, I don't know what the city mayor's intention is, whether, you know, £500,000, 2 cafes in relation to this, or £400,000. We might just leave the cafes for the private sector to deal with, Costa and all the rest of them. Does it really need a lot of money to put in these council buildings when most of our staff are working from home? So I don't know where the detail in relation to all of this is. When we're saying, in terms of the amendment, is we're asking for support, multiple schemes that we've put in, not affecting the actual capital programme that the Labour Group has put forward. So I'd really, really urge for you across the chamber to consider in relation to what we've put forward. And I'm sure a lot of the detailed points have been made, and a few will be made in relation to flood risk, in terms of investments in our areas, and in terms of increasing some of the environmental works and all the rest of it. So I'd really urge you to support it. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
There are no more speakers, so I'll go to Councillor Cassidy.
That's the main motion on the amendment. So Councillor Kittrick is reserved.
Oh, so beg your pardon, Councillor Kittrick.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It was good to hear from Councillor Bonham this evening because actually everybody else is silent. Yeah, the way that we've got used to running budgets generally, and capital budgets in particular, is we have Santa Claus Soulsby that you give your Christmas wishes in, and they may be answered. More often, they are not answered. Yeah. The general approach, looking across all the items putting forward, is to try and turn the council from an inward-looking organisation that spends on its own priorities and instead turns it outwardly to look at what people's priorities are. And you all as councillors are welcome to put forward ideas, yeah? And that is what we're seeking to do today. Where it gets money from is the internally focused buildings. I think with Councillor Bonham, he thinks that all of this money is spent absolutely to the penny, really efficiently. But what was brought home to me is if you care to go down to Leicester Railway Station and look outside and you see some civil engineering works they've done, you can tell what they are because it is the scruffiest looking fence you will ever see. Go and have a look at it. It looks appalling. I am dreadful at DIY. I could knock something together. It's bits of wood and chicken wire. And when the Leicester Mercury asked how much it cost the council £55,000. I tried to find out what budget it came from, but the budgets then disappear. Yeah? And you say, couldn't we have spent that money on somewhere else? Well, no, you can't do that. What we have here today is we have some specifics in the capital report, but there's a lot of generalities. But I'll just pick one thing that demonstrates yourselves as a Labour group's priority. The thing that's picked out that shines like a beacon is 10 times that amount, £550,000 on doing up the cafe at the King Richard III Visitors Centre. Good God, when Keir Hardie became the first Labour MP, I'm sure he said, it's my ambition in over 100 years' time that a Labour group will come to Leicester and they will move improvements to a cafe in the King Richard III's Visitors Centre. Because that's the priority, because that's what defines what, you look at this city, and I must say, everybody says, is it the flooding? Is it the fact that apparently we only have one working gully clearing machine in the city? Is it about sports facilities for people? Is it about community facilities? No, what we need to do is spend over £500,000 on remodelling a cafe. I wouldn't mind. I don't know what Mrs. Bridges on Lewsby Lane has done to the city mayor, yeah? But the simple fact is, even if this money was spent successfully, which I don't believe it will create a fortune, it then sucks trade away from hard-pressed cafes in the vicinity. What we should do is we should say, actually, we're not about cafes particularly. And actually, if we are about a cafe, then perhaps do up the cafe at Victoria Park Pavilion. Because actually, that is where there is a need for a cafe facility, for where parents take their kids during the week out to play, and they need somewhere to go. Yeah, they need decent facilities. And that's one of the examples in there. I believe we could do that through the LEP, could turn the pavilion into workspace. I've also spoken to people about providing football pitches at that location, because the climate emergency isn't all about the dramatic flooding. Carib FC play at Victoria Park, and they can't play on the fields anymore because the place is flooded. The ground is too sodden to play. So some of this will be about developing this. We've put on tonight what we believe are the priorities, outward looking for the needs of the city. We hope that you join us. We can get, Councillor Bonham wishes to put his own amendment, we can get a specific one done on the neighbourhood centres as well, and never a whole parade. But you've got to ask. We've got to break this culture of Santa Claus Soulsby. He's not a very good Santa Claus, because mostly he spends all his money on the railway station and cafes at the King Richard III Visitors Centre.
And the new War Museum.
And, and the Jury War Museum as well. Stuff that actually we never asked for, yeah? So let's actually change the narrative. Here are the suggestions. We hope they're taken on board. If they're not taken on board tonight, we will bring it up in the coming years. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Okay, there are no more speakers on the amendment, so I'll go. Sorry, big. Yeah. Hmm? Oh, so beg your pardon, sorry, yeah, sorry, no, you can't say anything anymore, sorry. Sorry, my mistake.
Lord Mayor, can we have a recorded vote on this, please?
No, wait, we are not there yet.
All right. Oh, sorry, Peter.
Actually, Lord Mayor, Councillor Porter has again just given it away. I mean, obviously, what they're wanting to do. No, obviously, what they're wanting to do is to get this cobbled up list voted against on this side of the chamber and then use it for political campaigning in the months ahead. It's quite clear that's why he wants the recorded vote, so they can pretend that somehow they are the champions of the people. Well, I'll tell them in advance, members on this side will not be voting for this cobbled up list, and they'll not be voting for this cobbled up list for a lot of very good reasons. Councillor Kitterick complained about silence. They've been silent for over 2 months. They've been to scrutiny for 2 months. Not a word. None of these things came forward at any of the scrutiny meetings. They sat there silent. And what they did instead was less than 2 hours before this meeting, less than 2 hours after 2 months, they send around this cobbled up list and they expect us to take it seriously. Well, frankly, we won't. We will be voting against it, of course we will. We're voting against it for lots of very good reasons, and some of them are actually set out in the notes that they had to send out with this because they were told that the Chief Finance Officer's advice had to be circulated as well. And had they had the courage, which they didn't have, to actually raise any of this at scrutiny, this would have been debated in public. But of course, they know perfectly well that the Chief Finance Officer can't speak in this chamber, and therefore can't tell them what load of rubbish this is. Can't tell them, for example, that on the fleet replacement, vehicles cost more to maintain than to replace them. That going ahead, as they suggest, would increase the use of taxis at significant revenue cost. She's not here. She can't say that. Yeah, but I can say that. But had they had the courage, had they already organised themselves, this could have been debated over the last 2 months in public, and the Chief Finance Officer could have told them that to their face. Or let's find another one. The Transport Improvement Programme that they want to cut. The impact would be to lose transport investment twice over. You'd lose the money, and you'd lose it next time because the government will never give it to us again. Or the reducing of the allocation to the operational estate capital maintenance. If buildings fall below safe standards, they will have to be closed. It's a cost to us. And had they had the courage, had they got themselves organised, they could have brought it to scrutiny, and she could have told them to their faces. But they didn't have the courage, and they weren't sufficiently organised. Let me go on. Laycroft Road Depot. I'm unable to advise whether this scheme could be delivered. Well, actually, if they wanted to reduce the cost, they should have brought it to scrutiny. They should have given her a chance to look at the implications of reducing it in this way. Or look, let me go to another one. Strategic sites. Oh, this is a good one. Because, of course, if you reduce the allocation for strategic sites, one of the things that it impacts immediately on is Ashton Green. It would negatively impact on capital receipts, and it would impact on the delivery of Ashton Green. Now, if they'd brought it to scrutiny, if they'd had the courage to do so, they'd have heard that direct from the finance officer. And of course, the King Richard III Cafe, properly assessed, it's a spend and save scheme, and it does cover its costs. Now, Lord Mayor, of course, as I say, they'll want to use this out there in the public debate and pretend somehow that they're championing the things that really matter to this city. Actually, what they're doing is acting grossly irresponsibly by not allowing the proper scrutiny of the proposals that they brought 2 hours before this meeting and that we will be voting against.
Okay. Sorry, no. Yeah. You can't. You can't. No, don't. Look. No. Hmm? No, look. Wait. Listen. No, let me finish. Councillor. No, Councillor Bhatia, listen. Yeah. Yeah, but Councillor Bhatia.
Chair, points of order. Chair, points of order. Chair, points of order. The debate's been closed, yet you're continually allowing the councillors to open the debate up again. So, point of order, we move to the vote, and that's it. The debate is closed. We can't continually have this debate opened up again. The grown-ups in the room would like to move to the vote.
I allowed you to speak, right? You moved the motion? Okay.
Yeah, we would like it to be a recorded vote on this, so we can do exactly what Peter said. Yeah, he's found us out. We want to go and tell everybody in Leicester that the Labour Council here don't care about the environment.
You just don't make a speech
and
on it.
don't care about the people
Don't make a speech of it. We just move to vote now. Okay, we are moving to vote now. Recorded vote.
Without further debate, thank you. Okay. I'll take the vote. So just to remind the chamber that what you are about to vote on is the amendment moved by Councillor Ray Bhatia, not the original motion on the capital programme moved by Sir Peter. So when I call your name, please say whether you are for the amendment, against the amendment, or whether you abstain. Councillor Adatia. Councillor Agath. Councillor Aldred.
Against.
Councillor Barney. Councillor Bajaj.
Against.
Councillor Barnes. Councillor Dr. Barton. Councillor Batul. Councillor Bonham. Councillor Kank. Councillor Cassidy. Councillor Chauhan. Councillor Clark. Councillor Cole. Councillor Kelvin. Lord Mayor.
For.
Councillor Dawood. Councillor Dempster. Councillor Gopal. Councillor Halford. Councillor Hack.
For.
Councillor Joshi. Councillor Karavadra. Councillor Kaur Saini. Councillor Kennedy Lount.
For.
Councillor Kittrick. Councillor Mahesh. Councillor Malik. Councillor Modwadia. Councillor Mohammed. Councillor Dr. Moore. Councillor Orton. Councillor Osman. Councillor Pantling. Councillor Pickering. Councillor Porter. Councillor Ray Bhatia. Councillor Russell. Councillor Singh Johal. Councillor Singh Patel. Councillor Singh Sangha. Councillor Sood. City Mayor. Councillor Surtee. Councillor Waddington. Councillor Wesley. Councillor Whittle. Councillor Zaman.
For the amendment 19, against 29. The amendment is lost. Now we are.
Now, Lord Mayor, we move back to the substantive motion. The only speaker on it so far, apart from the mover and the seconder who reserved, was Councillor Porter. So we're back to the chamber.
Right, we are back to the main motion now. Speakers?
No. If you've spoken on the amendment, you can speak on the main motion.
Okay, Councillor Gittrick.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It's a good opportunity to come back for the City Mayor about transparency. And so, as we're discussing the main motion, I'm sure, can everybody put their hands up who's seen the business plan for the King Richard III cafe at £550,000?
No.
One person. Well done, sir. I don't know how you got a copy of it, because when we asked to be supplied it at scrutiny, it wasn't there. I don't know. Maybe Sue, maybe you're going to be running it. I don't know. Sorry, I withdraw that. I'm sure Councillor Barton would have done. I'm going to come and have a chat with you later, Councillor Barton, about how you get access to this. So you've all voted £550,000 for the King Richard III Visitor Centre cafe, and you don't actually know whether it'll end up like the Jury Wall Museum, which will cost thousands more. You don't actually, nobody's really looked at the case for it. Yeah? And then, what we'll find as well is when the bill comes in for the railway station, yeah, and that will make some of these sums seem quite trifling. The railway station improvements that we were told, 10 out of 10 by the City Mayor, 10 out of 10 he said, that it would stay on budget. Yeah? And then he went out and nobody wanted to build it at that budget. But the City Mayor, yeah, was so confident it was going to be 10 out of 10, he demolished the parcel yard. Yeah? Because that was clever, wasn't it? Yeah? Perhaps if some grown-ups had actually asked, should we really demolish the parcel yard before we know that we can get the new stuff built, maybe we wouldn't be in a pickle that we are now, that every day there is a monument to the lack of scrutiny that Labour members give the Council's capital programme is a grey hoarding that you can, if you put on your tiptoes, you can look through the window and you can see what £22 million worth of public money gets you. A playground for rats, yeah? Because that's all that's come out of this project so far. The sewers and the basements of the parcel yard, you can see them every day. Now, there are some councillors who, in a non-whipped environment, Councillor Dr. Moore, Councillor Hack at Planning, did say that maybe it was a good idea to make sure that we could build the station redevelopment before knocking buildings down. So I'm all for scrutiny. We've lost this tonight. We'll take this through scrutiny. We'll ask the questions, yeah? But we do not apologise for putting forward people's priorities. And we do not apologise for challenging the council on its capital spend. Because you look at project after project after project where the council is not screwed down on its capital project costs, and it comes back later millions of pounds over. Yeah? So it is a case of, we've lost this one, but believe you me, it's not the end. Yeah, we will go outside of this council chamber and talk to people about what their priority is. I think Labour members need to do a wake-up call. If you follow recent council by-elections, you will see that almost uniformly the Labour vote is going down by 20%. You've lost 20% of your vote. I'd advise you go back to your election results. You take 20% of what you got in the vote, and then work out if you're going to be here in just over 2 years' time. And one of the ways that you might save your own skin if not the cities, which should be the priority, is to look back and see when you're going to stand up for the priorities in your own wards and not on city centre vanity projects. Think on about that. It'll be an interesting debate that we're going to have over the next 2 years.
Councillor Bhatia. Councillor Bhatia.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Very well said, Councillor Kittrick. City Mayor talked about scrutiny, right? These things, I'll give you a classic example of scrutiny. When the train station thing came to the planning briefing, which of course we were, who are not members were simply listening mode, but those who were members of the planning committee were sitting and asking questions. Councillor Cassidy, and there's a recording that you can see. Yeah. Councillor Cassidy himself asked the question, why did anybody not tell me that council has to pay £5 million towards it? He shares the OSC. He didn't even know that. You're talking about scrutiny. I mean, what kind of councillors do we have who don't even know exactly what A to B, left hand to right hand? There is no scrutiny, right? And this is the reason why we are where we are. And the reason why we have gone through this, I will tell you one thing. Between the three budgets, in fact, between this budget alone, if you take a fine-tooth comb and sift it, you can easily find £4 to £5 million just out of this, because the numbers are padded, the numbers are inflated, and that's where, when you vote for this, you give City Mayor a free ride through delegation to move around up to £10 million here and there. He doesn't even ask you. He doesn't even ask you. He doesn't ask us, of course. He can move around because you delegate that £10 million to him. Yeah, and the numbers are already padded up. So when you challenge for £300,000 out of 4.5 million line item, he's saying we are not serious. We are serious because we know those numbers are already padded up. And we have found those items purely focusing on exactly the same contingent area where it needs to go. So DFT will not challenge us when the highway money goes to the highways. We are asking exactly the same question. It's just that we are taking £300,000 out of that big budget of 4.7 towards highway drainage, yeah, flood prevention, and many other things which are frontline services for the public. So I don't, feel ashamed. You can call us that we are not grown up, fine. You can call us whatever you want. But what we have asked for is precisely the reason why, because there is no scrutiny and there is no answer to the questions when we ask. Hence, we have asked for that amendment. I hope the Labour councillors will understand and take some rightful action. Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy-Loud.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Councillor Kitterick has mentioned about the parcel yard this evening. And if I remember rightly, when this application originally came to the planning committee last year, we was advised at the time that we had to approve the parcel yard application to be demolished before the railway station application for the plans that were brought forward later on last year to go forward. Now, I don't know if other planning committee members feel the same who were on that committee at the time, or even members of this year's committee who have then approved the plans for the railway station at the cost that we were introduced to at the time, 5 million of council money and 17 million of national funding from elsewhere for the project, that has then since come to light that we have only had one contractor come forward to have a potential bid to make the plans go forward. In some cases, those of us that have sat on the planning committee for the last 2 years, do you feel in some respects that we've been had?
Okay, Councillor Huck.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Sorry, I was just adding the figures. I just wanted to let people know, on Granby Street, £695,000 was spent in 2008. Then in 2009, a further 1.95 million was spent, and then it was 1.35 million again, and in 2015, £28,000, 2022, £910,000. And in 2024-25, the recent development was £651,000. I'm not going to add it up because I can't add it up that quick, but that's a lot of money to spend on 200 metres of road. And that has been done several times. And you talk to the traders, and I know some of the traders on that street, they always said, oh, why does the council keep doing this, keep digging up our street? We're struggling because the trade, people don't know how to get to us, people can't talk, come to our shops, and it's been difficult for lots of those traders. There's a Turkish cafe guy who just opened up, Didium, just on the corner, and I went to have a chat with him. He said, oh, I decided to open a business, and I thought I'll put all my money into this business. He was working previously. He spent all his money on that business, and it was a total flop because they decided to do the roadworks. Now he's desperately trying to sell it, and he can't get his money back. And he won't get his money back. That's the reality. And what's happening across the city, like, as we've heard about the railway station, we were told at the time, if we miss this slot, we won't get the government money. We've got to do that. We cannot have any delays in planning, otherwise we won't get the money from the government and we won't be able to complete this whole project. And you're putting £10 million of funding at risk. We don't need the new railway station. We don't need to spend £5-6 million on that railway station. We can spend that money on some of our schools. Go and have a look at some of your primary schools. Go and see the conditions in them. The secondary schools are immaculate. I visited both of mine in my patch, City of Leicester and Judge Meadow. They're absolutely fantastic. But when I go to the primary schools and you walk round and you see the state of them, you think something needs to be done. And that includes Linden Primary, Oaklands, Whitehall, you name it, all of the primary schools. I'd rather use that money to be spending on those where those little children are having to use some of the worst facilities that you can imagine. And you just think, why? Why is this going on? And another thing I wanted to also mention, the council has this thing about we know how to use, we can use this money wisely. One of the first visits I did when I became a councillor was visit some of the local schools. I went to Linden Primary School, and the head, I had a meeting with the head, and I said, is there anything I can do to help you? He said, yes, we've got some solar panels on our roof. Could you help us get them connected? I said, okay, you've got solar panels, and they're not connected. And he said, yes, that's correct. I said, okay, fine, I'll try and find out. So I started chasing and try and get that done. And I rang him back, said, I'm chasing them, I'll try and get it done for you. He said, yeah, please, if you could. I said, how long has it been? And he said, last July. So it was almost 14 months since they'd been fitted and they hadn't been connected. Bear in mind that electricity, gas and energy costs had gone up. They were using their money from their budgets to prop up their energy costs. And these solar lights, solar panels hadn't been connected. And it would be almost 16 months before they got connected. I've asked a question under Freedom of Information about heat pumps, but there's schools across the city that have got heat pumps fitted that are not connected. And why are they not connected? Why is the council not able to actually make sure the core business, the reality is that they can deliver them? I see Councillor Clark shaking his head. I did send an email about 3 or 4 weeks ago about our children, and I was promptly put down a few weeks ago about our children. We were rated requiring improvement in every single area on children's services. No reply from Councillor Russell, no reply from the City Mayor. Is that how much commitment our city residents really deserve? Is that what it's all about? It's sad that you can't focus on actually what needs to be done across the city and what people need. And the reality is that, okay, you will win every vote. You've got the votes here. You can win every single vote. But out there, the public are listening and they're hearing. And they see, when they go to their primary schools, what's happening. They see the roads and the state of the pavements. They contact me on a regular basis. I can only do what I can do. You guys are in charge. It's your choice. But if you carry on failing, it will be their choice, not yours.
Any more speakers? Any more speakers? No? Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. OSC had a thorough review of this programme. They noted it. They didn't object to it. They didn't vote against it. They did have 2 points, though, that is very important, which is interesting, that scrutiny is where these things can happen, is that they wanted further details on the business case to be supplied for the Richard III Centre development. So they wanted further information on the business case. That's good scrutiny. And secondly, that they wanted to continue to scrutinise the developments at the railway station. So, as a chair of OSC, I'm happy that we support these proposals, and with noting what we agreed we should look at further. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, City Mayor.
My Lord Mayor, I think Councillor Cassidy has made a very important point at the end there, because scrutiny is there. When members raise things in scrutiny, it works. They've asked for the business case. Well, that's right. Then they'll get the business case. They've asked questions about the station, and they'll get those questions answered. But the fact is, as I said in reply to the amendment, members opposite, for the most part, don't bother to use scrutiny for the purpose that it's there for. They didn't use it for the items in their amendment, and they haven't used it to scrutinise this capital programme in front of us this evening. And that is sad. But I think coming bleating here this evening about it is inappropriate and pretty inadequate. My Lord Mayor, I'm not going to go back over what I said earlier on. I mean, the fact is we've got a reduced capital programme in the coming year. It's a capital programme that reflects the priorities that ward councils have put forward, that we all know are necessary across the city. I was grateful for Councillor Hack's comments about the need for us to spend on school maintenance. That's why we're spending £6 million in this budget on school maintenance. He's entirely right. Particularly in the primary schools, there's a lot to be done. That's why we're putting £6 million in. And I hope, and I see him nodding, I hope that that's welcomed by all members. 5.36 in highway maintenance. That's across the city. That's in the wards. That's potholes. That's pedestrian crossings. That's the things that matter to ward councillors. The 1.86 million for disabled facilities grants. I said it earlier on. It's a modest contribution, but it's one we can make. Help keep people out of hospital. It matters, and we're doing it. The local environmental works. I said it earlier on. Something that always gets a lot of attention from members when we have the meetings to discuss ward priorities. It's always there, and we get the feedback from ward members, and we reflect those priorities in the way in which we use that money. The work on the street cleaning equipment, again, I talked about it earlier on. It's not just in the city centre, although actually I do get quite a lot of complaints about the city centre, as we all do, when it comes to cleanliness, and it can never be good enough, and you always need to be investing in it, and that's what we're doing. Well, Lord Mayor, this is a balanced programme. It is a reduced programme. It's one that does reflect the priorities across the whole of the city, of ward councillors and members generally. And it's one, say, albeit reduced, that I'm very proud to support this evening and to ask members to support alongside of me.
I'm now putting the motion to the chamber. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Okay, thank you. All those to the contrary, please raise your hands. The motion is carried. Okay, we are on item 3C, the revenue budget 2025-26. May I just make a comment, City Mayor, please? Yeah? The rules say that the voting will take place on a recorded vote basis. Okay? So you don't have to stand up and say it will be recording vote on the revenue budget. City Mayor?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Sometimes at the end of these speeches, I thank the Chief Finance Officer, the Chief Operating Officer, and all of their staff for the support that they've given. I'm going to do it right at the beginning, because frankly this has been a major challenge to us and to them. And I'm going to pick out somebody in particular. It'll be somebody known to, I think, most, if not all, members here present, is one Mr. Mark Noble. I was trying to check earlier on, and I think it's over 25 years Mark's been with us, and he's been, for much of that time, our chief financial strategist. I don't know what his job title was, but he's been an invaluable part of the administration of the preparation of budgets and the delivery of those budgets. Mark's going to retire, and he'll be very much missed. I hope, on behalf of all members, that our Chief Finance Officer, Amy, can pass on to him our very best wishes and our grateful thanks. He is a man of infinite patience and a man of very considerable integrity, and also somebody who is one of the very few in the country who actually understands local government finance. He will be very sadly missed, and he's given us very good service, and we wish him well. As I said, my Lord Mayor, for many years now, we've said how hard it's been to prepare the budget, but this one really must be one of the hardest ever, if not the hardest ever. Despite the severe financial position, though, I'm absolutely determined that we'll avoid issuing a Section 114 notice. I've said that here before, and I'm now, I think, increasingly confident that we are able to do it, at least in the immediate term. It's something, obviously, that other councils have been forced to do. Nottingham, Birmingham, they've gone over the financial cliff edge, and I'm determined we will not. So we asked the government for support to buy us some time, at the very least, and in the grand settlement for 25-26, we did receive more than we had anticipated when we were first discussing this in the period November-December, when the budget was launched. We've got an additional sum of some £19 million. Now that's a large sum of money. It's a very welcome sum of money, and we're very grateful for the fact that we have now got a government that actually listens to those authorities such as ours who are in areas of significant deprivation and have suffered so savagely from the policies of the previous government. What the government has offered us will allow us to change some things that we had anticipated having to do, but what it doesn't do is to avoid the need for us to take some very hard decisions. The budget strategy that we have in front of us this evening consists of five strands. First of all, the releasing of the one-off monies, £110 million to buy some time, 20 million from reserves, and moving the 90 million that we're talking about when we were talking about the capital programme, back from capital to revenue, where it originally came from. Of course, as we were talking about when we were talking about the capital programme, that does mean an increase in borrowing, and that's one of the reasons why the capital programme is reduced, because obviously we don't want to borrow heavily on capital and lay the burden for that on the onto the revenue budget. It does involve reductions in capital spending of some £13 million, and it does have the potential for the sale of some council assets, the proceeds of which obviously could only be used, and now we won't need to ask for it in the short term, with the permission of the government, and only after other savings have been made to demonstrate that we are being responsible in the way we're dealing with our budgets. It involves us continuing to work to constrain the rising costs, particularly the rising costs in social care and the rising costs in homelessness services. I have to say that a number of the measures we've taken have been very successful in both of those areas, and particularly in the homeless services have involved the use of some capital to invest quite heavily in providing ways of relieving the revenue budget for homelessness. And of course it does involve savings to the revenue budget. During the budget process, there's been much concern over the future of adventure playgrounds, and they were mentioned earlier on. And obviously, we've listened to those concerns. I'm very grateful to councillors for setting up meetings, Councillor Ballick particularly, but other members joined me in meeting with the adventure playgrounds. It did allow us to discuss their future, and it does mean that thanks to the additional government funding, we can extend our support to the player associations to the end of the financial year. I'm aware the red light's come on, my Lord Mayor, so I will draw my remarks to a close. But I will commit to members that officers will work with the player associations to explore longer-term tenancy options where they're needed, and obviously we'll be looking forward to working with the government in future to settle funding, to get settlements in funding that match the levels of deprivation in our city. I move the motion set out on the agenda paper that members have had. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
We seconding it? We seconding the motion?
Ted.
Councillor Cassidy? Thank you.
Seconded, my Lord Mayor, and it's very important that OSC met and discussed this and noted it without any amendments, but it did ask that some further work is done on whether there is a way of funding the adventure playgrounds, and this was followed up by a task group of members to look at that, and have written to the City Mayor to ask for at least a year's funding, but preferably much longer, and to work with OSC for looking to find sustainable funding for the adventure playgrounds, which are an important part of the DNA of the City of Leicester. So we support, OSC supported the recommendations of going to Council today. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Any more speakers? Councillor Aditya?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I stand here today with deep sense of sadness, accompanied at the budget proposal. This budget for the financial year 25-26, which has implications for the following years to come, is a big step in the wrong direction. This Labour administration is kicking the financial can down the road and will eventually catch up in the years 27-28, unless, of course, the Labour government come to rescue. But we don't hold our hopes there. A government that does not care about old age pensioners and council tenants who cause heating bills in St Matthew's and Mark's estate to skyrocket and come up with a budget that does not address the concerns of the Leicester residents. My Lord Mayor, this budget, which proposes a council tax increase of 4.99%, does not specify any priorities, neither does it give recognition to what people need or want. It's all about internal priorities, about council pet projects which the residents clearly don't want. What people really want is clean streets, the end of rubbish dumping, more dustbins, more benches in parks and highways, decent children's play areas, traffic wardens, road resurfacing, environmental projects, quick responses to council house repairs, regular grass cutting, hedge cutting, a quick response to resident inquiries, CCTV cameras for both rubbish dumping and monitoring antisocial behaviour, repairs, upgrade to street lights and street signage. Instead, what are we getting? Probably more unwanted cycle lanes, more pet projects. This budget is measured against people's priorities will fail. Budget is about choice, about priorities, about listening to residents. This proposed budget has failed on all these counts. Also, don't stop blaming the previous Conservative government for their own mismanagement of the council finances, which with wrong priorities. Now there's a new Labour government, so we'll have to see what the years brings ahead. Finally, my Lord Mayor, as oppositions, we listen to people. We did put together amendments on how to address some of these issues, but based on the advice, we decided not to. However, we would certainly like to stress that the City Council do address the following issues. Open the customer service centre 5 days a week, improve telephone responses, assign dedicated parking wardens for the outer areas, assign extra street cleaning services wardens to support outer areas. Thank you.
Any more speakers? Councillor Kennedy Land.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. So, last year, the council tax was increased by 5%. The year before, 5%. This year, 5% proposed. It's like a broken record, but the annual unsurprise. But, for a moment, let's look at the reality of people's lives and costs across the city. Not as much as we are in this chamber making this decision tonight, but across ordinary lives if we were not in this chamber. People in the public gallery and people outside the doors of the town hall. Since Labour were elected, for pensioners, the Labour government have removed the winter fuel allowance on those of £12,000 a year or above. Businesses have had increases in national insurance contributions. So how many jobs will be lost over the period of this year in the city for this extra cost? Or during the lifetime of this Labour-led Parliament? This council last month changed the discretionary council tax support scheme. It was acknowledged more people would be worse off, although there was an increase in bans. Is it Labour's plan over the next 5 years of government to keep everyone poorer? They claimed last year people voted for change. But for ordinary folk, there's less disposable income for the burden of increased fuel and taxes at national, and tonight it will possibly be again at local level. We've already said tonight there is a lack of environmental and climate change proposals in the earlier reports. These are important challenges facing the city. This is the second time in 12 months, for example. The same wards have been affected by floods. Last year, I raised in this report concerns we were spending £5,000 on 40 heritage boards. 40 heritage boards each, let's be fair. I said at the time, why spend that amount? And he said, put it to flooding. It may have not been a significant amount, but it could have been something to alleviate problems which have been repeated. And I urge the Labour members opposite and their colleagues across the country to be supportive of how they spend money and look at how ordinary folks are being put in positions of their own disposable income. Thank you.
Councillor Kidrick.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I thank the City Mayor for granting the extension of 1 year's funding for the Adventure Playgrounds. However, it is not really a satisfactory way going forward. And one of the reasons why we couldn't finalise our plans on the capital budget was because trying to do battle with the Chief Finance Officer to allocate some capital funds to keep the Adventure Playgrounds going for a further year was some task. But we didn't actually find out about the fate of the funding for the Adventure Playgrounds until we get a press release yesterday. So actually, in terms of the transparency and the difficulty working as an opposition, it's difficult when people only tell you what's happening with 24 hours to go. Similarly, I'm quite happy to use scrutiny, having been excluded from it for the first year of this administration, and having turned up to neighbourhood scrutiny to try and raise a relatively mundane question about the use of weed killer, being told I couldn't ask a question at scrutiny. So I look forward to us being able and given the facility to scrutinise, and that those scrutiny chairs will allow us to scrutinise. But I think there are some questions, and again, these are just ideas that I'm putting out there in terms of how we spend our money. Because people say, well, why don't the Adventure Playgrounds find their own cash? The simple fact is the Adventure Playgrounds are located in some of the lowest income areas of the city. Yeah? In many senses, if that cash was lying about, ironically, it probably wouldn't need an Adventure Playground. Yeah? Imagining that you can magic up £1 million when you're a low-income community is a delusion. And yet, at the same time that we're told there is no money for Adventure Playgrounds, I'm going to put the figures out there because people should know. We currently have 152 top-tier officers who are all paid, or cost, not paid, they cost the council, these 152 officers, cost over £100,000 a year. to employ. And when I put the Chief Finance Officer and the Chief Operating Officer, could we perhaps reduce this headcount by 10%? So it was absolutely impossible. That there was no way that you could safely cut 152 officers down to, say, 140. That's even given the fact that in that same officer group, 13 people turned over in 2 years. So there's no recruitment freeze there. There's no, when we lose one of those 152, we think, actually, should we replace it? So who's protected? And the answer is the senior leadership is overprotected in this budget. The simple fact is, we have on page 125 of the report, and going on to 126, some of the costs. Yes, there has been a reduction in the senior leadership headcount by 23%. And that sounds really considerable, doesn't it? 23%, that's quite a lot. But then, in the same report, at the same time in the same period, there was a 50% reduction in the youth budget. 50, yeah? And for those of you who aren't good at maths, 50 is a far bigger number than 23. If you actually look at it, we now have 0 elderly care homes, yeah? So that's a 100% reduction, which again is a bigger figure than 23. And then going on to page 126, cumulative cuts since 2021 is 53.2% and 44.5%, all of which are bigger figures than 23. The entirety of those 152 employees is nudging somewhere near £20 million. So we're going to vote through this budget today. You've got the numbers. But the next time they come and tell you in the executive that there is no money, ask them, when you've got a budget for a senior leadership team, most of whose members are not statutorily prescribed, have you ever thought about putting a recruitment freeze so the pain of cuts can be shared a bit more evenly? And actually, we stop employing officers that each individually cost £100,000 a year, and we start looking after some of the lowest income communities in this city.
Okay. I don't see any more hands coming up. Councillor Budwari.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to add here, like example, if our house is messy, we don't feel like to do anything. At the moment, I feel Leicester is our bigger house and is messy. As the Councillor Aditya said, we need to invest more money to clean the house first. So like we should, I keep saying we need more employment in city, so that will solve the problem. So if we employ more people to rid of the rubbish from the Leicester city, so there is opportunity for more employment. Second, we have a traffic issue. A lot of people coming and complaining, people are parking wherever they want to park. So again, if we employ more people on the enforcement, then again we create the employment and that sort out the parking issue. Same, if we employ more people, then we have a less housing queuing up. If the Leicester city is clean and under all the, therefore, then outside investor will come and invest in the city. So if we sort out the planning issue and welcoming the businesses, then more employment will create. That will again sort out the more issue. And when is more employment, more businesses, the council will get more taxes and more fund coming into the city. So we should think that way to more create the more employment and make the city better. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
City Mayor.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Just a few points to pick up. First of all, I was running out of time to talk about adventure programs earlier on, so I'll just reflect on it and just say how grateful I was, obviously, for the fact that there was a meeting and I again, very grateful to Councillor Malik for setting it up, but also to those who attended from the adventure playgrounds who were very, very constructive in their dialogue with us. I mean, they really were, and a number of my colleagues were there present. I hear one of them saying they were brilliant, and they were. And one of the things that I don't think we should underestimate is just how much progress a number of them, not all of them, because some of them are finding it more challenging than others, but how much progress a number of them are making in moving towards self-sustainability. But they were saying that, you know, frankly, they need time, and they also need, I think in some cases, to have some reassurance that where they need it, they have more than a 5-year license for the properties, because obviously, you know, who's going to give them a grant to do something with the site if they've only got it for 5 years guaranteed? So we will be working with them on all of those things. But I'm very grateful to them. Of course, it comes back to the point I made earlier on, that we were able to do that because of something that has changed. And what has changed is the central government. We've got a government that actually cares. We've got a government that actually listens to us and talks with us and, frankly, gives us some help. A small amount of help in one sense, but £19 million in another sense is quite a lot of help. And it's very welcome indeed. And, you know, we look forward to working with them to develop a longer-term funding arrangement for us here in Leicester and for similar authorities up and down the land. Because what happened under the Tory administration was that those authorities that were most deprived lost most. And that's what happened to us. And there's a really good graph that Amy and her colleagues produced, you know, showing the correlation between deprivation and how much money a council lost. And it's stark. It really is. That, you know, we lost out, and cities like us lost out, while you know, frankly, leafy suburbs were protected. And that's changed, and that's changed quite dramatically. So I come really back to Councillor Adatia's you know, plea for more spending. Yes, we will be talking with the Labour government about more spending. But frankly, there's a heck of a lot of damage to be undone. We had a Tory administration, propped up by the Lib Dems in the early years, that cut savagely. And effectively, you can work it out how you like, but it's between 100 and 200 million we lost. Per year we lost. That's real services. That's the sort of things that Councillor Datia was arguing we ought to be spending on. Yes, we ought to be spending more on them, but we need the government support to do it. And I look forward to working with the Labour government to ensure that we do begin the process, because it's going to take some time to do it properly, begin the process of repairing the damage that the Tory government, propped up by the Lib Dems, did to the basic services that people in Leicester and similar cities rely on across the country. So, my Lord Mayor, I'm moving this this evening with some relief, because it looked like it was going to be a lot worse. As it is, the support that we've had from the government enables us to buy some time. It doesn't obviate the need for some very difficult decisions throughout the year, but at least we can avoid going over that section 114 cliff edge. I hope members will support this.
Okay, we are moving to a recorded vote now.
Okay, thank you. I will read your name, and I would be grateful if you could indicate whether you are voting for, against, or whether you abstain from the vote on setting the revenue budget, which includes the precept. Councillor Adatia.
Against.
Councillor Agath.
For.
Councillor Aldred.
For.
Councillor Akbani.
For.
Councillor Bajaj.
For.
Councillor Barnes.
For. Against.
Councillor Dr. Barton.
For.
Councillor Batul.
For.
Councillor Bonham.
For.
Councillor Kank. Councillor Cassidy.
For.
Councillor Chohan. Councillor Clark. Councillor Cole. Councillor Kelvin. Lord Mayor.
Against.
Councillor Dawood.
For.
Councillor Dempster.
For.
Councillor Gopal.
Against.
Councillor Halford. Councillor Hack.
Against.
Councillor Joshi. Councillor Karavadra. Councillor Kaur Saini. Councillor Kennedy Lount.
Against?
Councillor Kittrick. Councillor Mahesh. Councillor Malik.
For.
Councillor Modwadia. Councillor Mohammed. Councillor Dr. Moore. Councillor Orton. Councillor Osman. Councillor Pantling. Councillor Pickering. Councillor Porter. Councillor Ray Bhatia. Councillor Russell. Councillor Singh Johal. Councillor Singh Patel. Councillor Singh Sangha. Councillor Sood. City Mayor. Councillor Surtee. Councillor Waddington. Councillor Wesley. Councillor Whittle. Councillor Zaman.
Thank you. For the motion, 29, against 19. The motion is carried. We are on item 3D now, Treasury Investment Strategy 2025-26. City Mayor.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I move the motion that's been set out on the script that members have had. The report that I'm moving now encompasses all of the three elements that I think on previous years have been taken somewhat separately. But they're very similar to those that were presented last year. Firstly, the Treasury policy. It's a framework that sets out how we govern the Council's borrowing and its investments. It sets overall objectives. It emphasises the pursuit of optimum performance and effective control of risk. This is supported by the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26. It's an annual report that outlines a strategy for managing the Council's borrowing and cash balances for keeping the money safe. As I've said in previous years, where we have cash to invest, this is not extra money. It's not money we could spend separately. It includes grants we receive and don't have the chance to spend until later on, as well as our reserves and money we've set aside to repay future debt. We receive advice from our excellent Treasury advisors regarding potential investments, and many factors are taken into their consideration. These include, but are not limited to, money that could be made in return for the investment. Our main concern, and the main concern of those who actually operate this day to day, is making sure we get our money back, that it's kept safe, and that we get a good return on it, but that it isn't lost in the meantime. Finally, the report includes the investment strategy, which defines the Council's approach in making and holding investments, which are not covered under the Treasury Management Strategy. It serves as a clear guide outlining what the authority can and cannot do in terms of investments, and sets out the various thresholds that are in place to control this. The security of our investments remains, in this as elsewhere, our top priority. What we do make, we do not make the sort of rash investments that a number of other authorities, very high profile, have made, and where they have borrowed money that has been unwise in terms of what it's been put to, and we've avoided any risk. But I do want to thank OSC for considering all of these items and for the support that they've given, and I move that the Council be asked to approve the recommendations that are outlined in the report I referred to.
Councillor Cassidy. Is seconding it?
Seconded, my Lord Mayor.
Are you reserving your remarks? Councillor Cassidy, are you reserving your remarks? No? Okay. Speakers, any more speaker? Councillor Porter?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I won't spend too long talking on this subject. I see city mayors lump them all together as one, but he'll remember that ever since he's been bringing these proposals to the council, I've had serious concerns about it, because his own personal track record hasn't been very good when it comes to investing. Not that I want to make a point of that, of course, at this meeting, because that's his personal affair. And it's very disappointing for him personally. But when it comes to the use of public money, I think it's another matter. And the idea that's in this report that the investments take place in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and the City Mayor isn't very good at all, because I think the last person who should be involved in any of these decisions is the City Mayor. Basically because, for whatever reason, he appears oblivious to the advice that I've previously given him at these council meetings. And the first piece of advice I gave him, which he's clearly forgotten, was there's two simple rules to investing. And they are: rule number one, don't lose money. And if you look at what the council's previously done with their investments in property funds, offshore property funds, which weren't even approved by the Financial Conduct Authority, we'll see that the council's lost, I think, about 50% of the principal, which is, I believe, like maybe £1 million or more. And then once we'd highlighted that at the overview and scrutiny, the city mayor sits there oblivious and says, no, we haven't made any bad investments. And I think he even sent an email round to thousands of residents to say the council's never made any bad investments. So I've asked him, and I'll ask him again tonight, how do you square not making any bad investments with losing half of your principal in the Lothbury Fund, this offshore property fund, and how do you square it with losing over 600 grand giving to the Haymarket Consortium Limited? And I've been told that when they lent, so Peter signed those loans off. This is why he shouldn't be in charge of it. He signed those loans off personally. He didn't even ask for a guarantee. Like, you couldn't go to any high street bank and borrow 600 grand without making some commitment, either put your home down or other assets down in case you can't repay the debt. He just basically wrote them a blank cheque. I mean, in fact, it happened in two ways. First of all, they asked for 300 grand. He gave them a cheque for that. And then they came back a few months later with a begging bowl for another 300 grand. And he lent them that. So the idea that this man should be overseeing any of the financial decisions that this council's making is absolutely wrong. So we need to take that out of this report. So we should vote against it, because for all the reasons, he may be a very good politician, but he's not very good when it comes to investing. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If he was any good at investing, he wouldn't have lost over £1 million or almost £1 million in the Lothbury Fund, and he wouldn't have lost 600 grand handing it out to the directors of the Haymarket Consortium Limited. So he may well have all the best of intentions with his proposals, but the reality is he doesn't do a very good job. So in order to protect public finances, we need to keep him well away from it. I would say the worrying thing that we have here is that he wants to continue with his power game and control this money, even if it means losing millions of pounds. And the other thing that worries me, which is that he's going to be making a decision about selling assets, up to £60 million worth of assets. And the previous track record that he's got is not very good at all. They council used public money to spend over £5 million improving the New Walk Centre site. So there's a £5 million plus investment into that site. How much does he sell it for? 5 million, £6 million, you might think? No, he sold it for less than £24,000. In 2023, another more recent example, Castle View. There was a load of lovely houses in Castle View. The council auctioned them off for peanuts. Now, one of those houses, I don't know the exact price that it went for. It's just basically had a change of use from office, or what it would be commercial, to residential. It's now up for sale for 800 grand, right? I don't know, I can't remember the exact figure that it sold for, but it probably sold for around about 200,000 or 300,000. The council, with Sir Peter in charge, should not be making these decisions. If there's going to be any decisions made, it needs to come to scrutiny, because I don't trust him, and his track record demonstrates that he can't be trusted, and it's unfortunate.
Your time
I'm
is
not
up.
blaming him as an individual, because as we know, he's a very good politician. He's very good at manipulating people. But when it comes to investing, he's absolutely appalling. Thank you, Lord Mayor. You remember room number 2?
Any more speakers? No? City Mayor?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Councillor Porter is predictable. He's predictable that he'll bring forward the same examples time and time again, despite the fact that despite the fact that the Chief Finance Officer has on many occasions now tried to put him straight on them and to explain to him how he is far astray on his portrayal of what's actually happening in those particular predictable examples. But the fact is, Lord Mayor, that what we have in front of us here is a set of policies and practices that are about responsible management of public money. And they're not decisions that I take. They're decisions that are taken by the Chief Finance Officer and her staff on the basis of advice that they get from some very skilled and some very expert people. And, of course, what they do is manage our money very safely. Inevitably, when you make investments, not every single one of them pays off. But my goodness, overall, they pay off amazingly well. Not just for us as a council, but for the people of Leicester. And they pay off amazingly well because they are very professional officers, very well advised, very wise in the way in which they invest this public money. So, although, Councillor Porter chooses to try and take cheap shots at me about it, in fact, this is dealt with by those professional officers, and in fact, it's them he's criticising. And frankly, they don't deserve that criticism. Because I think we all know that the reality is that they act wisely, they act well, and they act on behalf of the people of Leicester. My Lord Mayor, I hope members will support this report this evening.
Okay. I'm now putting the motion to the chamber. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All those against, the contrary, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those abstaining? Thank you. The motion, I declare the motion carried. Item 4, any other urgent business? I have not been notified if any other items was in business, and I therefore declare the meeting closed. Thanks, Colin.
Well done, thank you. Don't forget this. Is this yours?
She gave it to me.
I don't eat chocolate. Thank you.